Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Abram Kielsmeyer-Jones, and I'll be with you for the next hour. This is part 2 of a 7-part series, Searches in Accordance, Basic to Intermediate. I offered this class last May, and with some adjustments and probably some additions along the way, we're offering it again. Accordance fundamentally is about searching. There's lots of other stuff you can do in it, but in terms of its programming philosophy and how it's written, and even what you see when you open up a new workspace for the first time, searching is fundamental to Accordance. So we're spending some time talking about all the ways that you can use it to run searches. We will review today what we looked at last time. That's in your handout here in gray, and then we'll do some search commands today. I'll talk about this handout in just a moment, but just to orient us to the technology, we use GoToWebinar as our webinar platform. So that control panel should be showing on your screen if you clicked on the link to log in and are here live. In that control panel, there is a questions box where you can type in any questions you have at any time. It's like a one-way typed chat. I will see those and respond either individually or to the larger group. And there is a handouts section where you can access this handout that I'm showing on the screen. We're also recording today, so you'll be able to go back and watch and rewatch if you want to. If you registered and are here, that means that you'll also get an email sent to you with a link to the recording and a link to the handout, or rather an attachment of the handout. And if you're watching on a recording later and want the handout, just email me at abramkj@accordancebible.com. We don't have these uploaded anywhere, but I'm happy to email the handout to you. I think that covers it, unless there are other questions that you have about logistics, in which case you can put those in the questions box. Otherwise, we will dive into the content of our webinar today. All right, 4 links up at the top here that may be useful to you. The first is a link to the help files in Accordance. I have never found a question that those help files did not answer. Well, that's not true. There may have been 1 or 2, but just about any question will be covered there. And so there's a link here, and if you follow this link, it will take you to a web landing page where you can choose what version of Accordance you're on and what machine. I'm presenting with Accordance 13. Of course, we're up to 14 now. I'm on a Mac, but if you had Accordance 14 on Windows, you'd find the help files there. You can also get the help files just right up here in app with the help menu and Accordance help, and that will take you right there to your app and device appropriate help files. And I mention that just because there's so much there around searching, and you can see basic searches, even that subdivides into lots of different stuff. This is really a lot of what we covered last week, so I just want you to have this for reference. The forums are here as well, forums.accordancebible.com, where you can interact with other users and ask questions. There's a getting started module that is free if you don't already have it. And then I also linked to last week's part 1. Here's the recording. You may need to enter your name and email to register if you're not already showing up in the system, but this is how you can get the recording for last week. Last week, we talked about just an introduction to searching. We looked at the search entry area and the go-to box. And the search entry area is here. And so when you open up, if I just start from scratch, file, new workspace, what Accordance does, and this is what I mean about searching being fundamental to the program, it opens up your default search text, which in this case for me is the NET, and it puts a blinking cursor right there in the search entry area. So unless you specify otherwise, Accordance assumes that the first thing you want to do when you open the app is search a text. And because your cursor is blinking there, you can just start typing and run a search. Now you can do lots of other things as your first task in Accordance, but that's where it starts. And so we spent some time talking about how you can use that search entry area, whether you search by verses, and we looked at searching for a reference, including multiple disparate verses. We talked about the context slider. We talked about searching by words as well. You can search by words. We talked about a flex search, the asterisk a little bit. We'll get more into that today. And then we briefly alluded to the go-to box, which is kind of a, think of it as a sort of sidecar, a way to help navigate your search results while preserving any search you've run in the search entry area. That was all last time. Today we're going to move into using search commands, and of course if you have any questions about anything from last week, please let me know. You can put those in the questions box. But today we're going to move into getting using some search commands. Page 2 of your handout is verbatim copy and paste of what's in the help files on connecting commands. So you can follow those links I sent you. You can also just, it's right here in your handout. And this explains these different connecting commands. We're gonna go through a few of them today, some of the probably more frequently used ones, and we'll talk about how they work. But it just notes here that connecting commands set up relationships between expressions, and so they must be preceded and followed by an expression. So we're going to look in just a moment at this AND connecting command. But you can't just search for AND in brackets. You need a word before it and a word after it, because what you're searching for is word A and word B. Maybe you're searching for word A followed by word B. That's another connecting command. So it's going to have a word in front of it and a word after it, or multiple words in front, multiple words after. But the connecting commands are enclosed in angle brackets. And then there are examples and explanations down here. So I wanted to include that in the handout. Today, we're going to research 2 different sets of names. One will be Abraham and Sarah. The other will be Saul or Paul and Barnabas. And I've chosen these because in 3 of the 4 cases, there are name changes involved. Actually, in Barnabas's case, there's a different name too. So we'll have to get to that when we get there as well. But I chose these because they maybe get a little bit trickier, and that will help us really understand how the wildcard can kind of do a lot of work for us. So we'll start with the AND connecting command. Again, we talked a lot last time about word searching, whether by flex or something more exact. But let's say I'm doing some research on Abraham and Sarah, and I want to just note here that if I can type in Abraham or I can type in Sarah, we did those individually. If I type in Abraham, Sarah in my search entry area with no connecting commands, Accordance will by default interpret that as an AND command. So it will say, it will read this search Abraham, Sarah as Abraham and Sarah if it's set to flex. Note that it's set to words. So what I'm searching here is the phrase Abraham, Sarah, which does not occur. But if I go to flex, or Accordance graciously gives me that option, it will run it as an AND search, Abraham and Sarah, anytime they occur together in the same unit of search, which in this case is the verse. We'll get to that in just a minute because you can even change that. But just typing in Abraham, Sarah is saying search Abraham and Sarah where both terms occur in the same verse. 46 hits, 21 verses. Note that if I go in here and type in the AND command, the search results are identical. So it's just to prove that. So really the AND command, you could skip it if you know that Abraham, Sarah running by a flex search is the same as doing Abraham and Sarah. But let's talk about these AND commands. Let's build them from scratch. So I'm just going to start over here, type in Abraham, and now I want to type in AND. And the connecting commands need to be put in brackets because that's Accordance needs a way to know that you're not searching the word AND in the text. And so you put it in brackets. If I typed in Abraham and Sarah, what it's going to search is the phrase Abraham and Sarah. You see that? And it occurs just here in the NET in Genesis 18:11. And that is not what I want to search. What I want to search, or maybe it is, but right now, what I want to search is Abraham and Sarah occurring in the same verse together. So we do Abraham, and now we need to enter the connecting command and. There are multiple ways to do this. You don't need to know all of them. You certainly could. You just find one that works for you and go with it. But Accordance often will give you multiple ways to perform the same task. You could, on the one hand, just remember that a connecting command needs a bracket, a pointy bracket. And so I can just type that in on my keyboard, AND, close pointy bracket, and then type in my second search term. There's my search. Or another option here is I could right click, enter command, and then there's and right there. Now, if I select that, it will put the brackets in for me. And this gets a little picky. I mean, if you're doing a lot of searches and are really into like keyboard efficiency and saving time, which after a while you probably would be, you may just not want to lift your fingers off the keyboard, and so maybe just typing it is the quickest. There's also even a keyboard shortcut where if you right click and enter command, you can see it there. So here on Windows, it's Shift Command A. I think it's Shift Control A on, I'm sorry, here on Mac, it's Shift Command A. It's maybe a little different on Windows, but it will tell you. And then that just typed it in, and there's my same search. You can also go to the search menu up at the top, enter command, and this is the same menu as you see when you right click, enter command. You just get at it from a different place. And then finally, another option is you can just start typing AND, and Accordance doesn't know yet, are you searching for the phrase Abraham and Sarah as it occurs in the text, or are you searching for Abraham and then Sarah as separate search terms, but you want the connecting command? That quick entry feature allows you to get it. That's what I use the most. And so if I were just to go to Paul and Barnabas, I'll just show you. I would go Paul and select connecting command Barnabas, and I didn't have to spend any time remembering which menu it's in, selecting enter command, going to and. Not that that takes that long, but again, when you're running a lot of searches, maybe you want to be more efficient here. So we'll review those different ways of accessing connecting commands because we're going to look at some more. But let's just switch over to Paul and Barnabas for a minute since I've got them pulled up here. Now what I'm showing is every verse where Paul and Barnabas occur in the same verse. Now, it could be the case that that occurs as the phrase, quote, Paul and Barnabas, end quote. But it could also be something like this. Here's Barnabas and Paul. Or here in Acts 14:12, they begin to call Barnabas Zeus and Paul Hermes. And so that's not the phrase Paul and Barnabas, but they're both occurring together in the same verse. If you were to run this search with Abraham and Sarah, you would see, like, here's Abraham early in the verse, here's Sarah late in the verse. So that is as expected. That's showing a verse where both of those words occur regardless of how close they are together. So here we have the Abraham and Sarah phrase, but here we have Sarah coming before Abraham and then Abraham coming before Sarah. It will all show up. I'm saying that this is all showing within one verse. You can change that in the scope search condition. And here's why that might be useful. Let's go to the go-to box again. This is a bit of review from before. This is showing me all of the books of the Bible or whatever books are in whatever text you're searching that have hit results. So the phrase, I'm sorry, the search Abraham connecting command and Sarah occurs in Genesis, Isaiah, I can skip right ahead to that, and First Peter. Interestingly, not in this set of search results is Hebrews 11, where I know Abraham and Sarah both occur. Now, one thought is maybe it has their original names in there, but it doesn't. I mean, you could just go to a new tab and type in Hebrews 11 and see it there. There's Abraham and there's Sarah with their renamed names. So why is this not showing? Well, it's because the scope is set to verse. So it's only showing me where there are two names occur in the same verse. This you can change. And I just only have a very brief note in the handout here. But this you can change in this scope search condition, which is useful not just for the AND command, but really for all of these. So maybe we'll circle back and look at it in some other cases. That is to the right of the search entry area. And if you ever see something in accordance and you're not sure what it does, like what is this plus with a circle around it, just hover over it. I'm not clicking anything, but just I'm resting my cursor there. And it says add a search condition, range, scope, etc. We'll talk about range in the future, but for now, we're going to go to scope. And you'll see it's showing as verse. That's what it's already set to. Even though it's nowhere to be seen, it is searching with the scope of verse. But if I want to change the scope to something else, you see the options there, verse, chapter, clause, sentence, paragraph, book. Let's go to chapter. And now, instead of just Genesis, Isaiah, and 1 Peter, this will surface Hebrews for me. So hit enter. And here, in fact, is Hebrews. And here are, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times where these words, either Abraham or Sarah, occur. But the AND command is returning these results because I'm saying, show me any chapter where Abraham and Sarah occur together in that chapter. And so that surfaced Hebrews 11. So the reason I'm showing you this is not just because it's always fun to learn more about the app, but if you're running a search for two search terms, that scope condition just in the verse may be a little bit limiting. In this case, if I'm studying the lives of these two, I would have missed Hebrews if I had searched for them with the scope set to verse. So just consider that in your searching. A lot of this will be trial and error, and maybe your scope is set to chapter first with any search, and then you narrow it down from there. We could try this with Paul and Barnabas too and see what happens here. I'm just going to keep the and replace the search terms Paul and Barnabas. So I've got 30 hits in 14 verses. And by the way, the way that Accordance is counting those hits is it's counting each word as one hit. So 30 hits of Paul and Barnabas means that I'm not going to count them all, but if I were to scroll through and count these, 30 terms in bold and red, whether that term is Paul or Barnabas. In other words, 30 times that either of these occurs. And so it looks like they're pretty evenly distributed here. And so we're just going to say it's 15 and 15. And in fact, 14 verses have hit results. And here's the one verse that has 2 hit results. So just some quick back of the napkin math here is showing that the number here in the search results, that's right next to this little analytics area, that number 30 is counting both terms. So it's not that the phrase occurs 30 times, it's not that Paul occurs 30 times or Barnabas, it's that there are 30, let's see what the scope is here, verses, 30 verses with Paul and Barnabas in it, but counting each of these names as a hit. So that's 30 total. Let me just pause there and check in and see if folks have questions or comments, and just as you take a moment to formulate any questions, what we'll do now is adjust this scope as we did with our Abraham and Sarah search. So I've got Paul and Barnabas, 14 verses, 30 total hits. If I'm searching with the verse scope, I'm sure that the chapter scope is going to give us more, because there may be a chapter in Acts where Paul is listed in like verse 1 and Barnabas is listed in verse 3 or something like that. And sure enough, 32 verses and 49 total hits. What questions or comments do you have so far, whether it's on any of the review? We did kind of a quick review just because I wanted to get into new material, and we did record last week. If you want to spend more time with it. But I've just introduced the search commands, maybe a little bit about the theory behind them, how they're construed by accordance. And we talked about the AND command and the scope search condition. We'll move on to some other connecting commands. If you don't have questions, that's fine. We can just pause for a moment and get ready to move to the next portion. Let me change the scope back to verse for now. You'll notice too, by the way, I don't know if you saw this. Let me do this again. If I have run a search already, so I just hit enter or return, the search string turns from black font to gray font. And so, I mean, I guess you could think of like a, I don't know, like something fading away. Like you've run the search, or burning out, from black to ash or something like that, to gray ash. The scope is chapter. I've run that search. If I change the scope to verse, it changes the font to black because I have not yet run that search. So it wants to make sure I'm not confused. And I don't think that what I'm seeing down here as hit results matches this, because the black means your search entry area is still live. You haven't run it yet. So I hit enter, and now that reruns that search. All right, so scope is at verse. We're going to close that additional search area for now and just go back to the single line. Let's move to the or command. Now, this is going to give me any verse, because that's what I just changed the scope to, where Paul or Barnabas occurs. That will be much broader because this is more restrictive. I'm saying I want Paul and Barnabas together in the same verse. Now it can just be one of them. It doesn't have to be both. And you can see how the hits increase quite a bit. So 226 total hits across 202 verses. This is going to show me any time that Paul or Barnabas occurs. Maybe I'm interested in some of the important key female characters in the story of Jesus's infancy. So maybe I do Mary or Elizabeth. There could be any number of or searches that you do. In fact, you can even build on these. It doesn't have to be just two search terms. Maybe you do Mary or Elizabeth or Joseph, or, and I'm just typing it in now, Zechariah. You can build on this. I'm just using two search terms for simplicity's sake, but you don't have to. But this is a much broader range. This is really just going to be either one of these. And in fact, now when I build this out to a 4-person or search, it just needs one to return a result. So Joseph, and I'm getting a lot of Joseph because it's Genesis 37. None of these other people is anywhere in sight. But as I scroll down, if we skip ahead, let's go to Matthew. There's Joseph, Mary. They happen to be together. But anytime any one of these occurs, it's going to show up here. And this makes us think, here's another and search I could do, Mary and Joseph. Where do they show up in the same verse together? So what will determine this is what you're looking for. What are you trying to research in accordance? What are you curious about? I'm just doing names right now, but this could also work for things like, I mean, we talked a little bit last week about love and God. What are verses where the word God and the word love occur together? What about God and anger together, and how do those compare? I mean, there's lots of theological or topical questions that might drive a search like this. So you want to think through what it is you're trying to figure out, and then how these connecting commands might help you if it's like a multiple term search that you're after. So let's go back to or again. I'm going to do Abraham or Sarah. So 278 hits across 242 verses. This is going to give me ones not where I'm requiring them to occur together, but where either one can occur. And so this will give me a much broader range to study from. I want to move on to followed by, preceded by, and within X words. And they're all related, so we'll look at them together, but let me just stop there and see what questions or comments folks have on the and search, the or search. Take a moment to formulate questions if you've got them, and while we think about that, let me just kind of add to this idea that you can build all these commands on top of each other. And so I might be, I mean, you could even do, all right, here's the Abraham and Sarah search. You could add Isaac and see, are those three in the same verse together? And look at that, they are. You could even tinker with this and do, like if you're looking for Isaac together with his parents, here they all are together, Abraham and Sarah and Isaac. You've got three verses. Maybe though that search should include Isaac just with Sarah or Isaac just with Abraham. And so I would change that first connecting command to or, and sure enough, I've got more hits as expected, because I'm only requiring Abraham or Sarah to be with and Isaac rather than all three of them together. So here's Sarah, Isaac, Isaac, Sarah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac. It still shows that verse where all three of them show up together. But then if it's just two of them, that shows up as well. Let me know if that doesn't make sense. And this is where it gets a little bit mathematical here too, where as you start to build these, I mean, you may just find it helpful, even just visually, to put in parentheses for yourself, so that you know I'm searching for Abraham or Sarah and Isaac. I don't know that that's actually required. Yeah, and that doesn't change. It doesn't change the search. Yeah, the parentheses can change the search actually. So you may just want to play with that depending on what it is that you're looking for. But know that you can build all of these together, and we'll do another example of that with followed by and within X words. Great question. Yeah, somebody says, let me just put this in the chat so you can see. Somebody says, do these commands work on the Greek as well? Yeah, absolutely. In Hebrew and in any language. So if I were to go to a Greek text and I were to search maybe agape, which fortunately Quick Entry is giving that to me, and maybe I wanted to search God after that. I always forget the Greek character for, hold on a second. Oh, it's Q. Okay, so Q, so theos, and then I need a connecting command. And what's cool about this, so let me start this over. Here's agape. I can just start typing A and D, and even though my search entry area is in Greek, and this will give me alpha nu delta, accordance is really great with the quick entry. It gives me the command as an option here. So then I can just type in agape and theos, and I've got 74 hits, 32 verses where these words occur together. And then same thing with or, same thing with building on this. Maybe you wanted to add another word. Yeah, this works in Greek and Hebrew. And you can see how, I mean, it can get confusing if you're just typing A and D. The quick entry takes care of that. This looks a little funny at first. If you didn't want to deal with that, you could right click, enter command, and or whatever else. We also looked at getting it from the search up here, enter command. So Accordance is smart in the sense that it's not deterred by the fact that you're searching terms that are in a different language, but you're using connecting commands with an English interface. It can handle that. Yeah, it's a great question. Any other questions or comments before we move on to followed by and preceded by? All right, let's talk about followed by and preceded by. Now, these are just what they say, and just a reminder, this is all on page 2 of your handout. X followed by Z finds verses where X is followed by Z. And that's all in the scope too. We could change that scope, but that's what that search will do. And preceded by is just the inverse of that. And then within is going to give us how close are those words together. So let's start with followed by and preceded by, and we'll do those first. So let's go back to Paul and Barnabas. And by the way, we do need to account for precision's sake for these name changes, and I'll spend some time talking about that. But let's talk about Paul and Barnabas and followed by. If I search for Paul and I'm just typing A-N-D and getting quick entry, Barnabas, hit enter, 30 times that occurs. Now it is Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Barnabas. Here's Barnabas and then Paul, but not as a kind of compound subject or object. But here it says, but when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard about it, and in 1512, they listened to Barnabas and Paul. Maybe my question is something like, how often does it show up as Barnabas and Paul? Maybe for whatever reason, you're just looking for the poetic variation or wondering about it, and you want to see Barnabas occurring before Paul. Well, that's really easy. And so your Paul and Barnabas search, of course, you can visually look through these and answer that yourself, but you can also get more precise results. So if you did Paul and then followed by, so same as the and command, you can right click, enter command followed by, you've got a keyboard shortcut here. It's up here in the search menu, or just start typing FOL, and then you don't even have to finish. Just select this from the quick entry, Paul followed by Barnabas. And my hits went down. I don't know if you saw it. It was 30 before, now it's 22, because it will eliminate those verses where Barnabas is followed by Paul. So I'm only going to get Paul first in the whatever scope. And what's my scope here? It's the verse. I'm going to get only places where Paul occurs first and then Barnabas. But maybe I want to reverse that. Barnabas followed by Paul. Not as often. They began to call Barnabas Zeus and Paul Hermes. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard about it, so they're listed as a duo with Barnabas's name coming first. It's the minority of times. And here's an interesting hit, 15:2, Acts 15:2. When Paul and Barnabas had a major argument and debate within them, the church appointed Paul and Barnabas and some others. Now, you'll note accordance is working exactly as it should here. This is an interesting case because on the one hand, we have the phrase is Paul and Barnabas. Well, I said I want Barnabas followed by Paul, not Paul followed by Barnabas, which would also give us this verse. In fact, both times it's the phrase Paul and Barnabas, but in this verse, it is still true that Barnabas, at this part of 15:2, the word Barnabas is followed by the word Paul. It just happens that Paul and Barnabas as a phrase is mentioned twice in that verse, but because of that, you've got Barnabas here, this use of Barnabas coming before this use of Paul, if that makes sense. Now, this will throw me, or at least cause me to take a little extra time if what I'm looking for is the phrase Barnabas and Paul specifically. Excuse me. For that, I can just go to Barnabas and Paul in quotes, and I don't have to think at all about any connecting commands. If I'm looking for a phrase, I can just search the phrase. There it is. But let's go back to what we had before, because I want to understand together how we would change this. If what I'm looking for is Barnabas and Paul specifically, again, the quote search is much quicker. But you can also specify that you want this within, so I'm typing the brackets, maybe within 2 words of Paul, and that will give you Barnabas and Paul. And here I'm nesting these commands together, so followed by and within 2 words, or preceded by. within X number of words. Let's go to another example that's not on the handout. God and love, and we'll do this. And let's say I'm looking for God is love kind of verses rather than you shall love God. And so I can choose between those two if I do God followed by love. And again, some of this is a little bit of art more than science. For one thing, and I appreciate that question about Greek. If your question is words occurring next to each other, just remember we're doing that in translation. And that's really for the sake of simplicity and demonstration. But if what you're after is real accuracy, you want to do this in Greek and Hebrew. And even then, there may be verses that talk about God as love and the word order is different. But we're going to try this, God followed by love, and see what we get here. Now this followed by command has no restrictions to it. So there could be any number of intervening words as long as the scope is set to verse here. So remember, it's searching within a verse. So just like the and the or commands, what I'm getting is anytime God, the word God is followed by the word love within a verse. And so I've got, so if I'm, preparing a study on God is love, are some of these relevant? Absolutely. Are all of them? No. For example, God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac. Well, that's not even talking about God's love for Isaac. So what you would want to do in this case, because this is a lot of hits, I mean, they've got 51 verses to go through, you can further restrict this search and say, like, here's a lot of intervening words between God and love. God is followed by love, but maybe if I want God is love or God shows love, what I need to do is add a within command so that it's still God followed by love, but maybe within just a couple of words rather than, you could have it at opposite ends of the verse. You could, another way around this is you could change the scope to clause. So that's one option. But even then, Lord your God will be testing you to see if you love him, all part of the same clause, but it's still not quite getting me where I want to go. You could try a sentence, but what I really want to do is the within command. So I'm going to build these two together, so followed by and within X number of words. And so I'm going to point the right, I'm going to type in the left pointy bracket and do within, let's say 2 words, close the bracket, love. And here I've got you are unfaithful to your God, you love. Well, unfortunately, that satisfied the, I mean, that's a hit result. It doesn't quite work, but I am getting more relevant results now. You yourselves are taught by God to love one another. And here's God is love, God is love. The God of love and peace be with you. Again, you'll still need to wade through these results, but you're making your search more precise, closer to what you want it to be when you put those two together. God followed by within 2 words, love. And so what that's saying is, show me God followed by love in the same verse, but it needs to be within 2 words. If you had just done God within 2 words, love, you'll have more hits, and love might come before God. And again, it all depends on what you're searching, but what I'm searching in this case is something like God is love. And so I need to, God within 2 words of love is great, but I want to do God followed by in the brackets. And by the way, I know all these connecting commands are written, the syntax is all capital letters. That is not required for Accordance to understand you. What is required is those pointy brackets. But you'll notice here I did followed by in all caps. And then within 2 words, that's lowercase, even though the syntax it's written out as all caps, Accordance. And if it has a problem with it, it will tell you. But the main thing you really want to get right is these pointy brackets so that it knows you're running a connecting command. Because you could be searching the word within, mean, the word within is in verses, and so the connecting command is how you tell it. Again, these will not run by themselves. And it will tell you the within command is in the wrong position. It must be preceded by a word expression. So we'll do God. And actually, now we need something here. Still isn't complete. It will tell you it should have a number. So you need to say within 2, and it didn't have words. So now you've got it and you're good to go. So you can either learn some of the intricacies of this syntax or just know that you can right click and enter command, or if you start typing Paul within, you'll get the command there and it actually fills out that syntax for you. Within question mark words, it just needs a value from you and then you're off and running with your search. We're going to talk next about the wildcard search, but let me stop there and see what questions or comments you have on followed by, preceded by, within X number of words. Great comment. Yeah, this may be in a future webinar, but I'm happy to do it now. Let me just get the other. Awesome. Okay, I'm putting this comment in the chat. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Somebody says maybe share example, blessed within one word's field begin shows all instances where blessed starts at the beginning of a verse, and then field end if you want to see result at end of verse. Great. So the question there is, what are all of the verses that begin with blessed? And if you just type in the word blessed, you'll get the results, but we want something more specific. So we're going to build the command. We've got blessed. We start typing within, quick entry. There's that, and then we fill that out with one word. And then what we need next is the field end command, which is down here. And we'll come back to this. I can't remember what session it is, but it's one of these 7. You could either enter command, you could do the keyboard shortcut, same as, all these commands, same place, multiple ways to get them, or you could start typing FIELD. And so I selected that from the quick entry. Now field proximity, begin or end, click OK. It's still in black. I haven't run the search yet, and I want to walk us through this before I do. Scope is set to verse. So the field now is the verse. It might not be, it could be the chapter. Maybe you want any chapter that begins with the word blessed. You could do that too, but we're going to do verse. I love this example that somebody shared. So I'm saying to accordance, blessed within one word of the verse field beginning, and that's like a coding term. So it basically will show us the first word of the verse as blessed. Ready? There it is. You can scroll through the results as expected. There are the Beatitudes. You might say to yourself, and I'll just comment briefly on this and then we'll move on, but you might say to yourself, well, wait a second, here's blessed are you, but it's not the beginning of the verse, and the Bible wasn't written with verse numbers, those came later. What if I want to see that? Well, experiment with this scope. I would just do scope sentence, and we should expect to see this Luke 6:21. Yep, there it is. It picked it up. It picked it up in the previous search because it started with blessed, but here it's in bold and red. And in fact, this gave us a verse that wouldn't have showed up in the first one, Mark 11:9. Here's blessed at the beginning of a sentence, not a verse. So yeah, I mean, you can just play with this. And some of this, I think it's worth just experimenting. Like, what does this button do? What does this search condition do? What happens if I change this to 2 words? That's well worth your time. But yeah, thanks so much for making that comment. I'm happy to circle back on that again in a future one. But yeah, that's a great use of within command, and it's sort of a counterintuitive one because it's not actually word X within word Y per se. It's word X within the beginning, within one word of the beginning of the verse or something like that. And that within one word means it is the beginning. I'm not sure that within 0 words would do anything because it won't let you do 0. So 1 is essentially your 0 there. It's saying the first word. And same with the field end. Any clauses that end with the word blessed, you could do that too. Great comment. Thank you. Any other comments or questions before we move to the wild card? All right, well, all of those searches that we were doing with Abraham and Sarah and Paul and Barnabas, we were missing results. I mean, we weren't missing results. Accordance was doing exactly what we asked it to, but all three of these 4 people had name changes. And then even Barnabas is referred to, I want to say this is Acts 4. Yeah, there it is. He's referred to as Joseph. So what that means now, it's only, I think it's only once here. So we didn't really miss much, and Barnabas showed up here, so we were okay. But if what we're doing is, trying to find everything that the Bible says about Sarah and Abraham or Paul and Barnabas, we need to account for the fact that their names changed. Now, if you didn't know this, like you just didn't have this knowledge of the story of either of these folks, it would come up with this Paul and Barnabas search, with this Abraham and Sarah search, you would see it. So however you attain to that, or whether you know that from the beginning, the wild card here is allowing you to expand your search. And so the 2 examples here are, if you want to include Abram for Abraham and Sarai for Sarah, just put an asterisk there so that your search, ABRA asterisk, that will give you all words that begin ABRA. So Abram and Abraham. Same with Sarai, SARA asterisk, all words that begin with SARA, so that will be Sarai and Sarah. With Paul, it's a little different. You still use the wild card, you just have to put it at the beginning. So what this is saying, asterisk AUL, is saying find all words that end in AUL. So let's just do that and see what that gives us. I'm going to put the scope back to verse, close it. So of course we've got Paul. You could also do, like I said, some of this is art. So maybe Paul or Saul gives you what you want. And we're going to get into the range command more later, but you could even Matthew through Revelation, or I mean, for that matter, Acts through Revelation, because there is Saul in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament. So you can qualify that even more. We'll spend more time on range. So yes, of course this works, but let's do the asterisk and see what comes up. So asterisk AUL, this is just to find Paul and Saul, assuming it's the same person. And in fact, here's Shaul, whoever that is, because it's anything with, so asterisk AUL. There may even be, if the word mall occurs in this context, MAUL, or in this translation, it doesn't. If it did, that would show up too. So literally anything that ends in AUL. So here's Saul, and then if I skip ahead to Acts, I can even see where it changes. Saul, 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 Saul. Scrolling down, he's still Saul. Paul is not mentioned yet, and I know that because I've run asterisk AUL, and if Paul had occurred by now, it would show up. But here it is, Acts 13:9. And in fact, this is a useful search to run because I can see here is the very verse where Saul is named as Paul as well. Now, unlike Abram/Abraham and Sarai/Sarah, there is not anything like a naming liturgy here, at least not that we're seeing. It's just this parenthetical note, Saul, also known as Paul. That would be worth checking your commentaries about. But because you've run your search with the wild card, you're not only getting all results for Saul and Paul, but you're also getting where they occur in the same verse, and that happened to give you, like, here's the point in Acts where it equates the two so that we know that it's the same person. And with that in mind, we can go back to the and search. So we'll keep the asterisk AUL, start typing in AND, get that from quick entry, and go to Barnabas, hit enter. And now I've got stuff that was not occurring before. Let me just duplicate this tab, put it over here. Paul and Barnabas, that doesn't start till Acts 13:42. So again, not to belabor this point, but just to say I would have missed some important information about them, but the wild card gives that to me. We looked at the wild card too in other contexts. Like if you're looking at the concept of love, you can word search LOVE, but you may also want loving, loving kindness, lover, loves. LOV asterisk will give you all of that. So the asterisk wildcard is just really helpful in lots of cases. In fact, there are more complex uses for it too that we may get to as the series goes on. But for now, changing Paul and Barnabas to asterisk AUL and Barnabas gets us into the first time that these two occur together, which is Acts 9:27, at least in a verse. And even there, we might say, let's change the scope to chapter. And now we've got more of the context here. Speaking of context, we've got the context slider. Remember that from last time? We can scroll that so that we get just the hit results. Let me go back to scope as verse. So when it's at 0, you're just getting a list of verses that have each of these words, or I should say both of these words with the asterisk. But if you slide the context slider forward, you can read more. So, but Barnabas took Saul. Well, that's just kind of dropping in. Let me get the context slider to A, and I can scroll up and down and read more. Same thing with Abraham and Sarah with the asterisk search. And I'm just using and here as an example, but all of these you can build. I mean, you could make a very, even with the connecting commands we've looked at today, which are not very many, you could build and build for a more complex search if you wanted to, again, depending on what it is that you're looking for. Maybe what you're looking for is something like Paul and Barnabas and a disagreement. And so it could be useful there. So maybe, I don't know, was he still Saul by name or Paul then? I don't know, asterisk. So asterisk AUL and Barnabas. And then I'm going to do and then something like disagree, maybe an asterisk there. And I don't even know if that's the right word, but actually it is. How about that? So I got right there with this search, and it was disagreement. So I'm glad I used the asterisk there. So when Paul and Barnabas had a major argument and debate within them, so if I hadn't found disagree, I could do argument or ARGU asterisk, so it would give me the verb argue. I might have also searched debate. It happened to all be there in the verse. Paul and Barnabas had a major argument and debate with them. Who's the them? Are they talking about within themselves? Well, no, it's some men from Judea. So I actually have to keep looking if I want Paul and Barnabas arguing, but you get the idea. Using all of the different commands that we've looked at today, you ought to be able to find your way to just about any combination of words that actually exists in the text. Oh, here's a good comment. Somebody says, note, Old Testament Saul appears in the New Testament, so not all Sauls are Paul. Great. And that's where the human element is still pretty indispensable. So in fact, I can verify that claim. I mean, I don't need to because I very much trust the person who said it. But if I just do Saul range mat through rev, what I would need to do here is, this appears to be Saul Paul. Here it is. It's Acts 13. I would just have to read through it. I mean, there's no way to tell accordance which Saul you're talking about, but sure enough, then they asked for a king, and God gave them Saul, son of Kish, a man from the tribe of Benjamin. And that, you can see, comes in the larger context of a salvation history speech, of which there are quite a few in Acts. So yeah, that's a great comment. Thanks for noting that. And yeah, I think that really does speak to the human element of actually interpreting the results here. Somebody asks, can you save search parameters to use later? Yes, I guess it depends on, let me know if you have specific parameters in mind, but if you ran a search that was fairly complex and you wanted to keep it, let me just do Saul and Barnabas and travel. Let's go back to disagree, because we found, all right. So let's say, and I'm just making this up, but let's say I want to save this. It's gray. Oops, it's gray. So I've run the search. I think that if I go to save for save workspace, and I'm just going to call this AKJ temp for now. See, it says AKJ temp there. I'm going to close this. And now if I go to file, open workspace, it should save that search string there because, yep, it did, because I'd already run it. So you can save the search strings there. I mean, maybe what you want to do now is duplicate the tab to not have to type that out, because maybe you want to see, okay, are there places where Abraham or Abram and Sarah or Sarai, where they disagree, or whatever verb you want, and not as recorded. Maybe there's something like laugh, and then you've got that. So yeah, you can save your searches in that way. As far as the scope, the place to check for that is in your settings or your preferences, and just type in scope in your general settings, and it will take you here to your search tabs. I think if you never have changed this ever in accordance, it defaults to verse, but you can change it so that the scope is always something else. These are the same options we saw before when we were changing the search scope. If for whatever reason, maybe you say, I just don't care about verse and chapter divisions. They're helpful, but what I really want is sentence every time I search. Hit OK. Now it changed it. It's not showing because I haven't hit the plus here. But if I hit plus and go to scope, it didn't take. I wonder if I have to open up a new, let's try this again. Yeah, now it is. I had to open up a new tab. So scope is sentence because I changed it there. So I don't know if I'm actually answering your question. Please ask a follow-up about search parameters, saving them. If I didn't answer it, happy to answer it. But yeah, you can save a bunch. All right, I'm happy for any other questions or comments at the end here. We will cover number 5 next time. This is less the kind of detailed, here's how you construct a search, and more like, here are some really cool features in Accordance that allow you to access your material really quickly. And so we'll go over those. We have separate webinars for just about every one of these bullet points anyway, but we'll do an overview at the beginning of next time. I'm going to stop the recording, but I will stay on. Somebody asks, when are you doing number 5? Yeah, we'll do that next week. Probably, typically I will be doing this series on Thursdays. Today was an exception, but typically Thursdays noon Eastern. And if you're not already on the email list, you can email Linda Perry, I'm putting this in the chat, at accordancebible.com to get the schedule of webinars that come out every week. Excuse me. I'm going to end the recording, but then stay on for just a moment for any other questions you have. So if you're watching on the recording, again, you can email abramkj@accordancebible.com for the handout or any other questions you've got.